The galactic research vessel, Endless Curiosity, hung in low Earth orbit like an iridescent soap bubble, its quantum crystalline hull refracting sunlight in ways that made it nearly invisible to the primitive scanning technology of the planet below. Inside the ship's primary observation deck, lead xenobiologist Zyx'vaar drummed their 4 secondary appendages on the holoscreen console, making a sound remarkably similar to someone impatiently tapping their fingers on a desk, though they would have been mortified to learn they were mimicking a human behavior. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Zyx'vaar said, their primary voice box vibrating with barely contained amusement while addressing the assembled research team. "This is the same planet that houses organisms called grizzly bears, apex predators that can literally tear apart most of the other local fauna, and the dominant species just lives with them." The ship's AI projected a series of images showing various Earth predators, each more terrifying than the last. Junior researcher Nexit adjusted their optical sensors, all 6 of them blinking in rapid succession. "Actually, lead researcher, it gets better," Nexit chirped, their excitement causing their chromatophores to shift through several shades of purple. "The humans not only coexist with these creatures, but they also study them up close, sometimes even treating their injuries." A ripple of electromagnetic disturbance, the equivalent of nervous laughter, passed through the assembled team. Zyx'vaar's upper eye ridge twitched, a sign of both disbelief and curiosity that had become their trademark expression during their 3 centuries of xenobiological research. The Galactic Science Council's preliminary reports clearly state that Earth's ecosystem is one of the most aggressive and dangerous ones we've encountered, Zyx'vaar continued, pulling up more holographic data. "And yet, these humans, barely a technological civilization by our standards, somehow managed to—" They paused, checking their translation matrix to make sure it wasn't malfunctioning. "Give medical attention to apex predators." "That's not even the most peculiar part," piped up senior data analyst Krelop, their tentacles waving excitedly as they projected additional data streams. "According to our long-range observations, humans have established entire protected territories they call national parks, where they deliberately preserve and maintain populations of these dangerous creatures. They even go there for recreation." The room fell silent as the team processed this information. Zyx'vaar's chromatophores shifted to a deep blue of contemplation. In all their years of studying alien civilizations, they had never encountered a species that seemed so completely oblivious to the natural order of things. Most civilizations either eliminated dangerous wildlife as they developed or separated themselves entirely from it. But humans? They built viewing platforms to watch them. "Well," Zyx'vaar finally announced, their outer membrane rippling with determination, "there's only one way to properly document this peculiarity. Prepare the cloaked observation pods. We're going to have to conduct a closer study of these national parks and their inhabitants, both human and otherwise." They paused, then added, with what passed for a grin in their species, "And make sure everyone's personal shields are fully charged. I don't want to explain to the Council how we lost a researcher to something called a bear." As the team dispersed to prepare for their groundside mission, Zyx'vaar remained at the observation window, watching the blue-green planet spin below. Something told them they were about to witness either the most impressive example of interspecies cooperation in the galaxy or the most spectacular display of human foolishness in recorded history. Either way, it would make for a fascinating research paper. The observation pods touched down in a remote clearing of Yellowstone National Park just before dawn, their adaptive camouflage rendering them nearly invisible against the backdrop of lodgepole pines. Zyx'vaar's team emerged, each researcher encased in their personal shield bubbles that made them look like walking soap bubbles in the early morning light. "Everyone remember," Zyx'vaar whispered through their neural comm, "our shields may prevent physical harm, but they won't protect us from looking absolutely ridiculous if we panic and float away at the first sign of danger." They paused, watching junior researcher Nexit already hovering a few inches off the ground. "I'm looking at you, Nexit." "Sorry, lead researcher," Nexit mumbled, forcing their shield bubble back to ground level. "It's just, did you hear that sound? It was like a high-pitched screaming." Senior data analyst Krelop consulted their sensory array. "That's called an elk bugle, and apparently it's completely normal here. though I must say, Earth's creatures seem to have an unnecessarily dramatic way of announcing their presence. The team made their way along a well-worn path, their sensors busily cataloguing everything from soil composition to airborne pheromones. They soon encountered their first example of human territory marking, a wooden post with various symbols and colors attached to it. Fascinating primitive warning system, Zyx'vaar mused, their chromatophores shifting to match the brown of the wooden sign in an instinctive attempt at camouflage. The yellow markings must indicate danger, and these pictographs of bears clearly mark this as predator territory. Yet, there are humans deliberately walking toward it. Indeed, a group of tourists passed by, completely ignoring the alien researchers thanks to their cloaking technology. A child in the group was enthusiastically waving around something that made clicking noises. "They're allowing their young here?" Krelop's tentacles curled in horror. "And they've armed them with some kind of primitive sonic weapon." "That's a camera," their AI assistant chimed in through their neural links. "Humans use them to create images for entertainment. They're deliberately documenting their presence in predator territory. For fun." Nexit's voice had risen several octaves. Maybe the preliminary reports were right. Humans are insane. Their discussion was interrupted by the approach of a park ranger in their distinctive hat and uniform. The alien team froze, despite knowing their cloaking technology was foolproof. The ranger stopped near their position, pulled out a small device, and began speaking into it. "Daily log, May 15th, bear activity increasing near Roosevelt Lodge. Reminder to update warning signs and refresh the bear spray inventory at the visitor center. Also, someone left their lunch in an unlocked car again. Had to chase off a young grizzly. Third time this week. Sometimes I think the bears are smarter than the tourists." Zyx'vaar's team exchanged bewildered looks through their shield bubbles. "Did that human just casually mention chasing off an apex predator like it was some kind of minor inconvenience?" Zyx'vaar asked incredulously. "Perhaps their protective gear is more advanced than it appears," Nexit suggested hopefully. The ranger walked past them, casually swinging something that looked suspiciously like a small canister. Their AI helpfully identified it as bear spray, a defensive tool that was essentially spicy air in a can. "They defend themselves against one of the planet's most dangerous predators with seasoning?" Krelop's tentacles went limp with disbelief. "That's it. I'm updating my will." As they continued their observations, they witnessed more inexplicable human behavior. People taking selfies with warning signs about dangerous wildlife, children running and shouting in obvious predator territory, and rangers calmly directing traffic around a massive bison that had decided the road made an excellent sunbathing spot. "I think I understand now," Zyx'vaar announced after several hours of observation. "This isn't a nature preserve. It's clearly some kind of human testing ground for their species' survival capabilities. They're deliberately exposing themselves to danger to prove their worthiness." "Actually," the AI interjected, "according to their information databases, they call this vacation." The ensuing silence was broken only by the sound of Nexit's shield bubble automatically compensating as they fainted dead away. The research station appeared decidedly unimpressive to Zyx'vaar's team. A cluster of log buildings that their scans indicated were made from actual dead plants. After much debate and several false starts, during which Nexit had to be coaxed down from hovering near the treetops, they decided to disable their cloaking devices and make official first contact with the human researchers. "Remember," Zyx'vaar instructed their team, "we've studied their first contact protocols. No sudden movements, maintain non-threatening postures, and whatever you do, don't release your stress pheromones. The last thing we need is to accidentally mark their territory." The humans' reaction to their appearance was underwhelming. "Oh hey," said a researcher looking up from her tablet, showing all her teeth in what their cultural database assured them was a greeting smile and not a threat display. "You must be the xenobiology team. Control said you'd be dropping by. Coffee's fresh if you want some. Just don't use the blue mug, that's Dr. Chen's, and he's weirdly protective of it." Zyx'vaar's chromatophores cycled through several colors of confusion before settling on a muted purple of professional dignity. "You were expecting us?" "Well, yeah, we get all sorts of researchers here, though I got to admit, you guys are our first extraterrestrials." She extended her hand, then quickly withdrew it. "Sorry, probably shouldn't assume you do handshakes. I'm Dr. Rachel Thompson, lead field researcher. Want to see what we're working on? Before they could properly process this bizarrely casual acceptance of their existence, they were being led through the facility. Dr. Thompson chatted away, pointing out various pieces of equipment that seemed to be held together with something called duct tape and hope. "And this is our tracking system," she said, gesturing to a wall of screens showing blinking dots over topographical maps. "We've got about 30 bears currently tagged with GPS collars." You place restraining devices on the apex predators?" Krelop asked, their tentacles curling in horror. "Well, yeah. How else would we study their migration patterns and breeding habits?" Dr. Thompson pulled up some data. "Though I'll admit, getting the collars on can be tricky. Last month, one of our females figured out how to use a tree to scratch hers off. They're pretty clever when they want to be." "You approach them while they're conscious?" Nexit's voice had risen to a nearly ultrasonic pitch. "Oh no, we tranquilize them first, usually," Dr. Thompson grinned. "Unless they're in the middle of something important like nursing cubs. Then we wait." The alien team watched in fascinated horror as she pulled up video footage of a human research team carefully approaching a sedated grizzly bear, taking measurements, attaching a collar, and then just leaving it there to wake up. But what prevents them from seeking revenge?" Zyx'vaar asked, trying to maintain their professional composure. Dr. Thompson laughed. "They're bears, not soap opera villains. Though speaking of bears with grudges, want to see something cool?" She led them to another screen showing a massive grizzly demolishing what appeared to be a reinforced container. "We're testing new bear-proof garbage containers. This is our resident expert, Bruno. He's broken through 6 different prototypes so far." "You named the creature that's destroying your technology?" Krelop's tentacles were now tied in actual knots. "Well, technically his designation is GB-347, but look at him, he's totally a Bruno." She beamed proudly at the screen showing the bear systematically dismantling the container. "He's teaching us a lot about ursine problem-solving capabilities." The aliens watched as Dr. Thompson pulled up more data on her tablet, which was protected by a case that bore several suspicious-looking tooth marks. She explained their various research projects: habitat preservation, population management, human-wildlife conflict reduction, which apparently meant teaching humans not to take selfies with bears, rather than the more logical solution of removing either the humans or the bears from the equation. "And here's our pride and joy," she said, leading them to a small building filled with screens and complex equipment. "Our real-time bear tracking and notification system. It alerts nearby campers about bear activity in their area. You inform your people about nearby predators so they can evacuate?" Zyx'vaar asked, relieved to finally hear something that made sense. "Sometimes. Mostly they just use it to know where to set up their cameras." Dr. Thompson shrugged at their collective gasp of horror. "Don't worry, we've got protocols in place. Plus, most bears around here are pretty used to humans. We've got one female, Grace, who's basically a regular. She brings her cubs by the research station every spring like she's showing them off." As if to punctuate her point, an alarm chimed softly. Dr. Thompson checked her tablet and broke into a wide grin. "Speaking of Grace, looks like she's heading this way with her new cubs. Want to meet her?" The sound of 3 alien shield bubbles simultaneously activating to maximum power was her only answer. Dr. Thompson led the alien research team to an observation platform behind the station, their shield bubbles humming with enough power to repel a small asteroid. The morning mist was just beginning to lift from the valley, revealing a massive grizzly bear ambling toward them with 2 cubs in tow. "That's Grace," Dr. Thompson said proudly, as if introducing an old friend rather than an 800-pound apex predator. "She's been part of our study group for 8 years now. Those are her newest cubs, about 3 months old." Zyx'vaar's scientific curiosity briefly overcame their survival instincts. The smaller ones appeared to be exhibiting random movement patterns, they observed as the cubs tumbled and played. "Yeah, they're basically furry chaos machines at this age," Dr. Thompson chuckled. "Watch this, they're about to drive their mum crazy." Sure enough, one cub decided a nearby tree trunk was the perfect gymnastics equipment, while the other seemed determined to catch its own tail. Grace watched with what the aliens were shocked to recognize as the universal expression of parental exasperation. "Fascinating," Krelop murmured, their tentacles unwinding slightly from their stress knots. The maternal behaviors are remarkably similar to sweet, merciful nebulas. Why is it coming this way? Grace had indeed changed direction, heading straight for the observation platform. The alien researchers backed up so quickly they bumped into each other, their shield bubbles creating a brief light show of ricocheting energy. "Oh, she probably smells the honey," Dr. Thompson said casually, pulling a jar from her pocket. "It's her favorite treat." You deliberately attract them with food." Nexit's voice had gone so high only quantum sensors could detect it. "Only Grace, and only during checkups. She's got a minor infection in her paw that we need to look at. Speaking of which," Dr. Thompson keyed her radio. "Hey, Dr. Chen? Grace is here. Bring the antibiotic spray and some fresh bandages." What happened next would feature prominently in the aliens' nightmares for decades to come. Grace reached the platform and sat down like some kind of trained pet. While her cubs wrestled nearby, Dr. Chen emerged from the station carrying medical supplies with the casual air of someone approaching a slightly impatient patient rather than a wild predator. "The infection's looking better," he commented, kneeling down to examine Grace's paw. "Still, better safe than sorry. This might sting a bit, old girl." Grace actually lifted her paw for him. Zyx'vaar's chromatophores went completely white, the equivalent of a jaw drop. That's not possible. The data clearly shows these creatures are territorial, aggressive, and..." Their scientific protest was interrupted by one of the cubs, which had apparently decided that Dr. Thompson's bootlaces were the most fascinating thing in the universe. The cub began batting at them with tiny paws that nevertheless housed claws capable of shredding steel. No, buddy," Dr. Thompson gently shooed the cub away. "Those aren't toys. Here, try this instead." She rolled a large rubber ball toward the cub, who pounced on it with delight. "You're playing with it?" Krelop's tentacles had gone completely limp with shock. "While its mother, capable of ending your existence with a single swipe, watches." "Grace knows we're helping," Dr. Chen said, finishing up with the antibiotic spray. "Bears are incredibly intelligent. They can form strong bonds of trust if you respect them and, are you all okay? Your bubbles are starting to change color." Indeed, the aliens' shield bubbles had begun to take on the iridescent sheen that indicated their power supplies were straining from sustained maximum output. But what happened next nearly caused a complete shield failure. Grace apparently decided that her cub's checkup was also due, gently picked up one of her babies by the scruff, and handed it to Dr. Thompson. Nexit fainted dead away, their shield bubble automatically compensating to keep them floating upright. Krelop's tentacles tied themselves into a sailor's knot that would take weeks to untangle. Zyx'vaar's chromatophores cycled through colors so quickly they briefly invented 3 new ones. "There we go," Dr. Thompson said, checking the cub's ears and teeth while it squirmed and playfully batted at her face. "Healthy as can be. You're doing a great job, Mama." She handed the cub back to Grace, who then promptly presented her other baby for inspection. The entire process took less than 5 minutes, after which Grace collected her cubs, accepted another dollop of honey as a reward, and ambled off into the forest as if she hadn't just shattered every xenobiological principle the alien researchers held dear. "That's impossible," Zyx'vaar finally managed to say, their voice barely a whisper. "Our most advanced wildlife preservation planets require quantum barriers and robot handlers to even approach predator species. Yet you just..." "Oh, this is nothing," Dr. Chen grinned. "Wait until you see what happens when the wolves bring their pups by for their vaccinations. Those guys are real drama queens about getting shots." "The wolves come here voluntarily." Krelop's voice had taken on the hollow tone of someone whose entire worldview was crumbling. "Well, yeah, we've been working with some of these family groups for generations now. Their great-grandparents knew our great-grandparents. It's all about building trust, respecting boundaries, and occasionally bribing them with honey." Dr. Thompson paused. "Though don't put that last part in any official reports. We have a reputation to maintain." Zyx'vaar looked at their research team, Nexit still unconscious but floating serenely, Krelop's tentacles now resembling a quantum physics equation expressed in macrame, and their own chromatophores stuck in a loop between scientific amazement and existential crisis purple. I believe, they said slowly, we may need to completely revise our understanding of both human capabilities and Earth's ecosystem. Also, does anyone know how to reset a shield bubble? I think mine is stuck in imminent death mode. Back inside the research station, the alien team huddled around mugs of hot chocolate, a beverage that Dr. Thompson assured them was essential for processing shocking experiences. Nexit had finally regained consciousness but kept muttering something about impossible mammals while clutching their mug with all four appendages. So let me make sure I understand this correctly, Zyx'vaar said, their chromatophores still stuck in a bewildered swirl. You not only study these creatures, but you also rehabilitate them, return injured predators to full hunting capacity, on purpose. Dr. Chen nodded, careful not to touch the blue mug that sat untouched on his desk. We have a whole wildlife rehabilitation center about 20 miles from here. Everything from injured eagles to orphaned wolf pups. He pulled up some images on his tablet. Here's one of our recent success stories. A young grizzly who got into some trouble raiding campgrounds. Instead of euthanizing him, we taught him to forage naturally. He's now thriving in the backcountry. You re-educated an apex predator? Creolop's tentacles formed a question mark shape. Like sending it to some kind of murder beast academy? Murder beast academy? Dr. Thompson snorted hot chocolate through her nose. I'm totally putting that on our next grant application, but seriously, it's about understanding their natural behaviors and working with them, not against them. She pulled up more files showing various rehabilitation projects, bears learning to fish, wolves being taught to hunt wild prey instead of livestock, even eagles practicing flight patterns in specially designed enclosures. What truly confounds us, Zyx'vaar admitted, is how your species went from being prey animals to whatever this is. Our historical databases show that humans once lived in constant fear of these creatures. Oh, we still have a healthy fear, Dr. Chen corrected. That's essential for coexistence. The difference is we've learned to understand and respect them rather than just trying to eliminate them. Watch this. He showed them footage from a rehabilitation center's security cameras. A human handler was teaching a young bear to break open logs to find insects, normal bear behavior that this orphaned cub had never learned from its mother. The alien researchers watched in amazement as the handler demonstrated the technique using tools, and the bear actually observed and mimicked the behavior. But that's tool use transmission between species, Nexit exclaimed, temporarily forgetting their terror in their scientific excitement. That should be impossible. Impossible is kind of humanity's specialty, Dr. Thompson grinned. Did you know we once domesticated wolves into creatures that now help us take selfies and wear sweaters? The aliens stared at her in horror until she pulled up pictures of dogs, leading to another round of hot chocolate and existential crises. We've documented over 300 distinct positive interactions between rehabilitated animals and our research team this year alone, Dr. Chen continued, pulling up their database. Everything from bears allowing medical treatment to wolves helping us track other pack members. Grace isn't unique. She's just one of many success stories. But why, Creolop asked, their tentacles gesturing expansively, why put in all this effort? Why not simply separate your species from these dangerous creatures? Dr. Thompson's expression grew serious. Because we're all part of the same ecosystem. These animals were here first. We're the ones who moved into their territory, who changed their habitats, who disrupted their natural patterns. We owe it to them to find a way to coexist. Besides, Dr. Chen added with a slight smile, have you seen bear cubs playing? Or a wolf pack working together? Or an eagle teaching its chicks to fly? That's worth protecting. Just then, a young intern burst into the room, barely noticing the aliens in their excitement. Dr. Thompson, remember that pair of orphaned mountain lion cubs we rehabilitated last spring? They'd just been spotted with cubs of their own. The human researchers erupted in cheers while the alien team watched in bewilderment. Dr. Thompson wiped what appeared to be moisture from her eyes. Sorry, she said, noticing their confusion. It's just, this is why we do it. Those cubs wouldn't have survived without our help. Now they're not just surviving, they're thriving. They're passing on their genes, their behaviors, their survival skills to a new generation. And they still remember their training, Dr. Chen added proudly. The report says they're staying clear of human areas, hunting natural prey, everything we taught them. Zyx'vaar's chromatophores shifted to the deep blue of profound realization. You're not just preserving these creatures, they said slowly. You're evolving with them, creating a new kind of coexistence that our sciences claimed was impossible. Not impossible, Dr. Thompson corrected gently, just improbable, like most good things in life. The alien researchers watched as the humans excitedly planned a celebration for their latest success, complete with something called pizza and more hot chocolate. Nexit had finally stopped trembling every time they heard a bird call outside. Krelop's tentacles had unknotted enough to take notes. And Zyx'vaar was experiencing something entirely new in their centuries of research. The humbling realization that sometimes the most primitive methods, patience, understanding, and trust, could achieve what the most advanced technology could not. "Oh, hey," Dr. Thompson called out suddenly. "Almost forgot. We're doing wolf pup vaccinations tomorrow. Want to stick around and help?" The synchronized activation of 3 shield bubbles was answer enough. Official report to the Galactic Science Council, Earth Wildlife Management Assessment, lead researcher Zyx'vaar, status, urgent reclassification needed. To the distinguished council members, I must begin this report by formally requesting the immediate reclassification of Earth's status from primitive death world with peculiar dominant species to ecosystem of unprecedented interspecies cooperation that will make you question everything you know about biology. Our research team has spent the equivalent of 1 Earth week observing human wildlife management practices, and I can confidently state that everything we thought we knew about predator-prey relationships, species cooperation, and basic survival instincts is, to use the human phrase, completely out the window. Key observations. 1. Humans have developed successful rehabilitation protocols for apex predators without using any form of quantum containment, neural reprogramming, or genetic modification. They accomplish this through what they call understanding animal behavior and what I call sheer audacity, backed by surprisingly effective results. 2. Local wildlife, particularly ursine specimens, have developed cooperative behaviors with humans that defy all known xenobiological principles. Our team witnessed a female grizzly bear voluntarily surrendering her cubs for medical examination. I require all council members to note that this sentence is not a translation error. 3. Human researchers regularly approach dangerous predators with nothing more than a canister of spicy air for protection. Their success rate suggests either unprecedented interspecies diplomatic skills or a fundamental misunderstanding of mortality that somehow works in their favor. Database updates required. Remove suicidal tendencies from human species description. Replace with bewilderingly effective ecosystem integration strategies. Add note, human medical care extends to apex predators. Yes, really. No, we don't understand how they're still alive either. Update Earth classification from danger level extreme to danger level, technically extreme, but somehow it works. Recommendations. 1. Immediate establishment of a permanent research station to study human wildlife management techniques. Note, all assigned researchers must sign special waivers acknowledging that they will witness things that violate everything they learned in xenobiology school. 2. Development of new scientific categories to classify human-wildlife interactions, as current terminology fails to capture the full scope of apex predator, voluntarily presenting cubs for medical care while accepting honey as payment. 3. Revision of galactic wildlife management protocols to include what humans call positive reinforcement, and what our team has termed treating murder beasts like oversized pets and somehow not dying. Personal notes and observations. I feel compelled to mention that during our stay, I witnessed a human researcher scold a fully grown grizzly bear for attempting to open a garbage container the wrong way. The bear, instead of separating said human's head from their shoulders, as all our scientific models would predict, actually looked chastised and moved on to a different container. Junior researcher Nexit has requested a transfer to studying gas giants, claiming they are less terrifying than watching humans casually interact with Earth's wildlife. Request denied on the grounds that we need their continued documentation of these impossible events. Senior data analyst Krelop's tentacles have developed several new knot patterns previously unknown to mathematics while attempting to process human-wildlife rehabilitation statistics. These patterns have been submitted to the Mathematics Council for further study. Conclusion. In conclusion, I must admit that our initial assessment of Earth's ecosystem and its dominant species was fundamentally flawed. We approached Earth expecting to find a primitive world where natural selection operated along predictable lines. Instead, we found a planet where humans have effectively redefined the rules of interspecies relationships through what they call conservation, and what I can only describe as systematized madness that produces miraculous results. The humans have a saying, life finds a way. After observing their wildlife management practices, I would amend this to, humans find a way, and then they teach that way to bears. Final recommendation: any future research teams sent to Earth should be required to bring their own hot chocolate, as it proves surprisingly effective at managing the existential crises that inevitably occur when witnessing human-wildlife interactions. Respectfully submitted, lead researcher Zyx'vaar. P.S. Our team has been invited to observe wolf pup vaccinations next week. I am simultaneously terrified and fascinated, which I'm told is the normal response to most human-wildlife management practices. If this report arrives late, assume we have either achieved unprecedented breakthroughs in interspecies cooperation or been adopted by a wolf pack. Both outcomes seem equally likely at this point.